My name is Alex Turner. Sounds ordinary, right? That's always been the point. Blend in, disappear into the background noise of life. It's a useful skill, especially when you're trying to escape the kind of noise that claws at your insides and refuses to let go. For the past few months, that noise had been deafening. It was the kind of static that buzzed behind your eyes, a constant hum of anxiety that vibrated through my bones. City life, they call it. But it felt more like a pressure cooker, slowly tightening its grip, so when the invitation came, it felt like a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. The invitation wasn't fancy, no embossed lettering or gilt edges, just a plain, cream-coloured postcard tucked into my mailbox amidst the usual junk mail and bills. The front showed a picture of a lake, impossibly still and reflecting the surrounding pines like a mirror. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on the water's surface, peaceful, serene, a world away from the concrete and sirens of Chicago. On the back, in neat, looping cursive, was a single sentence, "Comb to Oakhaven." It's been too long, no signature, no return address, just that cryptic message and the lure of that tranquil lake. Oakhaven. The name tugged at a half-forgotten memory, a whisper from childhood summers. I racked my brain, trying to place it. Oakhaven, it sounded familiar, like a place from a dream, or a faded photograph tucked away in a dusty album. Then it clicked. Oakhaven was my grandmother's cabin, Grandma Elinor. She'd passed away years ago when I was barely in high school, a kind, quiet woman with a love for nature and a penchant for telling stories that always seemed to have a shadow lurking at their edges. I hadn't thought about Oakhaven in years. After she died, the cabin had been dealt with. Probate estate sales, the whole messy business of settling things. I'd assumed it was sold, gone. Another piece of the past fading into oblivion. But the postcard, "Come to Oakhaven." It's Bill would send this. And why now? A strange mix of curiosity and unease prickled at my skin. It felt like a breadcrumb. Dropped in my path, leading somewhere unknown. I flipped the postcard over again, studying the lake picture. It really was beautiful. The kind of beauty that whispered promises of escape, of quiet, of healing. And God, did I need healing? The city had chewed me up and spat me out, leaving me frayed and exhausted. The thought of that stillness, that serenity, was intoxicating. Against my better judgment, against the nagging feeling that something was off, I decided to go. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was desperation, maybe it was just plain stupidity. Whatever it was a pull I couldn't resist. Finding Oakhaven wasn't easy. It was even more remote than I remembered. My GPS sputtered and died miles before I reached it, leaving me to rely on faded memories and a crumpled, hand-drawn map I'd found tucked away with a postcard. The roads turned from paved asphalt to gravel, then to rutted dirt tracks barely wide enough for my old Jeep. Trees crowded in on either side, their branches clawing at the vehicle like skeletal fingers. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The sunlight, so bright and cheerful on the postcard, was now filtered and weak, casting long, distorted shadows that danced in my peripheral vision. As I drove deeper into the woods, a sense of isolation began to settle over me, heavy and profound. No cell service, no other cars, no signs of civilization. Just the endless trees and the deepening silence. It was the kind of silence that wasn't just the absence of sound, but a presence in itself, a living, breathing thing that seemed to watch and listen. Finally, after what felt like hours of winding through the wilderness, I saw it. A break in the trees, a glimpse of blue through the branches. And then, the lake. It was exactly as pictured on the postcard, maybe even more beautiful in person. The water was so clear it looked like glass, reflecting the sky and the surrounding forest with perfect fidelity. The air here was different too, cleaner, crisper, carrying the faint, sweet scent of pine needles and lake water. The oppressive weight of the woods seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of something lighter, almost hopeful. The cabin sat on a small rise overlooking the lake, nestled amongst a cluster of ancient oak trees that gave the place its name. Oakhaven. It was smaller than I remembered, more weathered, the wood siding faded and greyed with age. The porch sagged slightly, and the windows looked dark and vacant, like empty eye sockets staring out at the world. But despite the disrepair, there was a certain charm to it, a rustic, timeless quality that spoke of simpler times. I parked the Jeep in the overgrown driveway and stepped out, stretching my stiff limbs. The silence here was different from the silence of the woods. This was a quiet peace, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was calming, almost instantly. I felt a sliver of the tension that had been coiled tight in my chest begin to unwind. Taking a deep breath of the clean air, I walked towards the cabin. The front door was a heavy, solid thing made of dark wood, scarred and scratched with age. A rusty padlock hung loosely from the latch unlocked. Hesitantly, I reached out and pushed the door open. It creaked inward with a groan that echoed in the stillness. Dust motes danced in the shafts of weak sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows. The air inside was stale and musty, smelling of damp wood and something faintly acrid, like burnt sugar mixed with decay. It was an unsettling smell, a discordant note in the otherwise peaceful atmosphere. The main room was small and sparsely furnished. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold and dark. A worn, floral pattern couch and a couple of armchairs sat facing it, shrouded in dust sheets. A rough, hewn wooden table and chairs occupied the center of the room. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, undisturbed for years. It was clear no one had been here in a long, long time. I stepped further inside, my footsteps echoing on the bare wooden floorboards. The silence seemed to press in again, heavier now, laced with that strange, unsettling smell. A shiver ran down my spine. Despite the mild temperature, it was cold in here, a damp, bone-chilling cold that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I noticed something on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. A small framed photograph. I walked closer, drawn by an unseen force. Reaching out, I carefully lifted the photograph, blowing away a layer of dust that obscured the image. It was a picture of Grandma Eleanor, younger than I remembered, her face alight with a smile. She was standing in front of the cabin, the lake shimmering behind her. Beside her stood a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a warm smile that mirrored hers. I didn't recognize him. There was a familiarity, a faint echo of something I couldn't quite grasp, but I couldn't place him. On the back of the photograph, in the same looping cursive as the postcard, was another message. "We're waiting for you, Alex." The blood in my veins turned to ice. "We're waiting for you." Who was we? Grandma Elena, and the man in the picture. But they were both gone, dead. This is impossible. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence. The peaceful serenity of the lake, the charm of the rustic cabin, it all seemed to evaporate, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The air in the room felt colder now, the silence heavier, the smell of decay stronger. I dropped the photograph back onto the mantelpiece, my hand trembling. I had to get out of here. This was a mistake. A terrible, foolish mistake. Whatever had drawn me here, whatever had sent that postcard, it wasn't good. It was something wrong. Turning to leave, I stumbled back towards the front door, my breath catching in my throat. But as I reached the doorway, I froze. Something was different. The door, which I had left slightly ajar, was now firmly closed. And not just closed, but latched. The rusty padlock, which had been hanging loose, was now snapped shut, the heavy shackle firmly secured. Panic flared, hot and sharp. Trapped. I was trapped. In this isolated cabin, in the middle of nowhere, with a message from beyond the grave and a locked door. My breath hitched in my throat, and the silence of Oakhaven suddenly felt less like peace, and more like a predator patiently waiting in the shadows. The padlock, cold, heavy, and undeniably locked. My fingers fumbled at the rusty shackle, tugging, pulling, desperate for it to give. But it was solid, unyielding. Panic tightened its icy grip around my chest. Trapped. The word echoed in my mind, a frantic, hollow sound. Taking a shaky breath, I forced myself to step back from the door. Panic wouldn't help. Logic reasoned that's what I needed. There had to be another way out. Windows. The cabin had windows, right? I turned, scanning the main room. Yes, 2 windows, one on either side of the fireplace. Small, grimy, but windows nonetheless. Hope flickered, a tiny spark in the growing darkness of my fear. Rushing to the nearest window, I peered out. It looked out onto the side of the cabin, facing the woods. Trees pressed close, their branches almost touching the glass. Too high. The windows were too high off the ground to simply climb out of, and they were old, probably painted shut, maybe even nailed in place. Still, I had to try. I grabbed one of the wooden chairs from the table, dragging it over to the window. Climbing onto the seat, I reached up and tried to pry the window open. It wouldn't budge. I pushed harder, straining with all my strength. Nothing. It was as if it were fused to the frame. Frustration surged, hot and bitter. I slammed my fist against the window pane, the sound echoing sharply in the silent cabin. It was solid, thick glass. It wouldn't break easily, not with my bare hands. My gaze fell on the fireplace. Tools. Fireplace tools. Maybe there was something there I could use. I scrambled over to the hearth, my heart pounding with a desperate urgency. A set of fireplace tools leaned against the stone wall: a poker, tongs, a shovel, and a small, heavy-looking axe for splitting kindling. The axe. That could work. It was heavy enough, sharp enough. Grabbing the axe, my hands trembling, I returned to the window. The weight of the tool felt strangely reassuring in my grip, a solid, tangible thing in this increasingly unreal situation. Taking a deep breath, I swung the axe at the window pane. The glass shattered with a sharp, cracking sound, showering the floor with shards. A rush of cold pine, scented air flooded into the room, a welcome relief from the stale, musty atmosphere. Yes, I had an escape. I swung the axe again, widening the hole in the window. Jagged edges of glass still clung to the frame, sharp and dangerous. Carefully, I began to clear away the remaining glass, using the poker to knock out the larger pieces. It took longer than I expected, my hands clumsy with fear and adrenaline. But finally, the window was clear, a gaping hole in the side of the cabin, large enough to climb through. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made my knees buckle. I was going to get out. I was going to escape this place. But as I started to climb through the window, something stopped me. A sound. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. A whisper. It seemed to come from inside the cabin, from the shadows behind me. A soft, sibilant sound, like dry leaves rustling in a non-existent breeze. I froze, my body tensed, every nerve on high alert. Silence. Then the whisper again, closer this time, clearer. It whispering my name. Alex. My blood ran cold. I whipped around, scanning the room, my eyes wide, searching the shadows. Empty. Nothing there. Just the dusty furniture, the cold fireplace, the lingering smell of decay. Alex? The whisper came again, softer this time, almost a sigh. It seemed to come from the fireplace, from the dark, gaping maw of the chimney. Slowly, cautiously, I moved towards the hearth, the axe held defensively in front of me. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic warning. Who's there? I croaked, my voice barely a whisper itself. Who's calling me? Silence. Only the faint rustling of leaves outside, the gentle lapping of water against the shore. And then, the smell. Stronger now, more pungent, that acrid, sickly sweet odor of burnt sugar and decay. It seemed to emanate from the fireplace, from the chimney. I peered into the fireplace, my eyes straining in the gloom, darkness, just soot and ashes, the cold remnants of long, dead fires. Nothing there, just shadows and the unsettling smell. Alex. The whisper again, closer still, right behind me this time. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat, expecting to see what? A ghost. A shadowy figure. I didn't know. I just knew something was there. Something unseen, unheard, but undeniably present. But again, nothing. Empty space, just dusty room, the silent furniture, the cold, pervasive dread. Yet, the feeling of being watched, of being listened to, was overwhelming. It was as if the cabin itself was alive, aware of me, observing me with unseen eyes. The whispers continued, soft, insidious, just at the edge of hearing. My name, repeated over and over, a constant. Unnerving murmur that seemed to seep into my very bones. Alexei, Alex. I backed away from the fireplace, my gaze darting around the room, searching for the source of the whispers, for any sign of anything. But there was nothing to see, nothing to hear but that incessant, disembodied murmur of my name. Driven by a desperate need to escape the whispers, I stumbled towards the back of the cabin, towards the only other door I'd seen, the one leading deeper into the unknown. Maybe, just maybe, that door wasn't locked. Maybe it led to another way out. Any way out was better than staying here, trapped in this whispering cabin. The back door was smaller than the front, made of the same dark, weathered wood. No padlock this time, just a simple latch. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and terror. The latch clicked open. I pulled the door inward, and it swung open with another groan, revealing a hallway, narrow, dark, and even colder than the main room. The smell of decay was stronger here, almost overpowering, making my stomach churn. A single, bare light bulb hung from the ceiling at the end of the hallway, casting a weak, sickly yellow light that barely penetrated the gloom. 2 doors open off the hallway, one on either side, and at the very end, a third door, directly beneath the dim light bulb. The whispers seemed to fade slightly as I stepped into the hallway, replaced by a different kind of sound, a low, rhythmic creaking. Like old wood groaning under stress, it seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the very structure of the cabin. Hesitantly, I started down the hallway, my footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor. The air grew colder with each step, the smell of decay more intense. The creaking of the cabin walls grew louder, more insistent, a constant, unsettling soundtrack to my growing dread. Reaching the first door on the right, I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. What was behind it? Another room filled with whispers. Something worse. I didn't want to know, but I had to. Staying in the hallway, trapped between the whispering main room and the unknown depths of the cabin, was not an option. Taking a deep breath, I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. It creaked inward, revealing a bedroom. Small, sparsely furnished, and just as dusty and neglected as the main room. A narrow bed stood against one wall, covered with a faded quilt. A small wooden dresser sat in the corner, its drawers slightly ajar. A single window, even smaller and grimmier than the ones in the main room, looked out onto the darkness of the woods. Empty. The room was empty. No whispers here, just the same oppressive silence, the same bone-chilling cold, the same unsettling smell. Relief washed over me again, weaker this time, quickly replaced by a renewed sense of unease. Empty was good, but empty also meant no escape. I stepped into the bedroom, cautiously scanning the room. Nothing seemed out of place, nothing seemed threatening. Just dust, decay, and the lingering feeling of being watched. Moving to the dresser, I slowly pulled open the top drawer. Empty. The second drawer. The third drawer. Empty. Frustration gnawed at me. Nothing. Just emptiness. This cabin was a dead end, a silent, whispering, decaying dead end. Turning away from the dresser, my gaze fell on the bed. The faded quilt was rumpled, as if someone had recently been sleeping there. But that was impossible. No one had been here in years. Had they? Hesitantly, I reached out and pulled back the quilt, and froze. Staring down at the bed beneath, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't empty. Lying on the bed, nestled amongst the dusty sheets, was something that made my stomach clench, and my breath catch in my throat. A photograph. Another photograph. But this one wasn't framed. It was just a loose, faded photograph, lying face down on the pillow. Slowly, my hand trembling, I reached out and picked it up. Turning it over, I stared at the image, my mind reeling, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a picture of me as a child, maybe 10 years old, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, holding a fishing rod almost as tall as myself. I remembered that day, summer at Oakovan with Grandma Elinor. Happy, carefree, innocent. But on the back of the photograph, scrawled in the same looping cursive as the postcard and the other photograph, was a new message. A message that made the whispers seem almost benign in comparison. "We know you're here, Alex." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in, pressing down on me, suffocating me. "We know you're here." They weren't waiting for me. They knew I was here. They had been expecting me, watching me. All along. And the whispers, they weren't just whispers. They were voices, voices that knew my name. Voices that were inside the cabin with me, voices that were waiting. Panic, sharp and cold, seized me, locked in. That padlock hadn't been there a moment ago. I distinctly remembered seeing it hanging loose. Now, it was firmly fastened, a solid click echoing the finality of my entrapment. I rattled the door handle, yanking it back and forth. Solid, unmoving. The wood felt thick and unyielding beneath my frantic grip. Desperate, I threw my weight against the door, slamming my shoulder into the aged planks. Nothing. The cabin remained stubbornly sealed, mocking my efforts with its silent resistance. Breathing heavily, I stepped back, my gaze sweeping around the small room, searching for another way out. The windows. Of course, the windows. They were old-fashioned casement windows with simple latches. Surely, they wouldn't be locked too. I rushed to the nearest window, fumbling with the latch. It was stiff, rusted with disuse, but it clicked open with a protesting groan. Relief flooded through me, a brief, fragile wave. I pushed the window open wider, expecting to feel a rush of fresh air, the scent of pine and lake water. Instead, a wave of stagnant, musty air wafted out, carrying with it that same unsettling smell of burnt sugar and decay, only stronger now, almost cloying. And the view, it wasn't the sun-dappled lake I expected. The light outside had shifted, the sky darkening with an unnatural swiftness. Heavy bruised, purple clouds had rolled in, obscuring the sun, casting the landscape in a dim, oppressive twilight. The lake, once shimmering and inviting, now looked like a sheet of lead, its surface reflecting the ominous sky with a disturbing stillness. The trees surrounding the cabin seemed to have grown closer, their branches gnarled and twisted, like skeletal arms reaching out. A chill deeper than the damp cold of the cabin seeped into my bones. This wasn't right. The postcard, the picture, the memory of sunshine and serenity, it was all a lie. Oak Haven wasn't a refuge, it was a trap. I leaned further out the window, trying to see if there was another window nearby, another escape route. But the cabin was small, and this window faced the side, overlooking only more trees, dense and impenetrable. The other windows were on the front, facing the lake, but they were too far to reach from this side without going back through the locked door. Frustration and fear warred within me. I could break a window, I supposed. But the glass looked thick-hulled, and who knew what waited outside in that unnatural twilight? And then what? Wander into the darkening woods, with no cell service, no idea where I was, and a growing certainty that I was not alone. No, breaking a window felt too reckless, too desperate. There had to be another way. There had to be a key, another door, something I was missing. Calm down, I told myself. Panic wouldn't help. Think. Taking a deep breath, I pulled back from the window and turned back to the room. Okay, recess. Start with the obvious. Keys. If the door was locked, there had to be a key somewhere. Grandma Eleanor wouldn't have left the cabin without one. I began to search the room systematically, starting with the mantelpiece. Nothing but dust, the framed photograph, and a few knacks: a small porcelain bird, a smooth grey stone, a tarnished brass candlestick. I checked under the candlestick, behind the photograph. Even inside the porcelain bird it was hollow and dusty, but empty. Nothing. Next, the table in the centre of the room. I ran my hands over its rough surface, feeling for anything hidden, any loose boards. Nothing. I checked under the table, around the legs, even tilting it slightly to look underneath. Still nothing. Then the couch and armchairs. I pulled off the dust sheets, revealing worn, floral upholstery faded and threadbare. I plunged my hands into the crevices between the cushions under the seats. Dust, more dust, and a few stray springs poking through the fabric, but no key. Frustration mounted with each fruitless search. Where could it be? Grandma Eleanor wasn't one for hiding things. She was practical, organized. If there was a key, it should be somewhere obvious, somewhere easy to find. Unless it wasn't meant to be found easily. Unless the lock wasn't meant to be opened. Unless a chilling thought snaked its way into my mind. Unless I wasn't meant to leave. No, stop it, I told myself firmly. Don't go down that rabbit hole. There's a logical explanation for all this. There has to be. I moved on to the fireplace. The hearth was cold, filled with wheezing and the remnants of long, dead fires. I ran my fingers along the stone mantelpiece again, feeling for anything I might have missed. My fingers brushed against something small, tucked into a corner, almost hidden from view. It was a small, wooden box no bigger than my palm, plain unadorned wood with a simple brass clasp. Hope flared in my chest, a tiny spark in the growing darkness. Could this be it? Could this be the key? My fingers trembled as I lifted the box. It was surprisingly light, almost empty. With bated breath, I unclasped the brass latch and opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was not a key but a small folded piece of paper. Disappointment pricked at me, sharp and immediate. But curiosity quickly followed. What other message? Carefully I unfolded the paper. It was thin, brittle with age, and yellowed around the edges. Written on it, in the same looping cursive as the postcard and the photograph, were more words. But these weren't as simple, as direct, as the previous messages. These were different. They were fragmented, disjointed, almost like whispers caught on the wind. Words and phrases jumbled together, making little sense at first glance. Listen, always watching. Not alone. She knows. Don't trust the lake. Thim. Inside. Coming closer. I read the words again, and again trying to piece them together, to find some coherent meaning in the cryptic fragments. Listen, walls, always watching. What walls? Watching what? Not alone, she knows. Who was she? Grandma Eleanor. And what did she know? Don't trust the lake of them inside. Who were them? And what was inside? Inside the lake. Inside me. Coming closer. What was coming closer? And to whom? To me. A cold drip began to creep into my heart, coiling around my ribs, squeezing the air from my lungs. These weren't just random words. They felt directed, personal, like warnings, or invitations. As I stared at the paper, a faint sound reached my ears, so subtle at first I almost dismissed it as my imagination. A soft scratching, coming from the walls. I froze, holding my breath, straining to hear. There it was again, a faint rhythmic scratching, like tiny claws scraping against wood. It seemed to be coming from inside the walls themselves, from somewhere deep within the structure of the cabin. My blood ran cold. Listen, walls. The words on the paper echoed in my mind, suddenly taking on a terrifying new significance. Were the walls alive? Were they listening? Were they watching? The scratching sound grew slightly louder, more insistent, and then, interwoven with the scratching, I heard another sound, even fainter, almost imperceptible. A whisper, a low, sibilant murmur, just at the edge of hearing. It seemed to be coming from the walls too, from the same place as the scratching. I strained my ears, trying to decipher the whisper, to make out the words. But it was too faint, too indistinct, just a breath of sound, a rustle in the silence. But even though I couldn't understand the words, I could feel them, feel their intent. They were cold, hungry, and expectant. The scratching and whispering continued, growing slowly, subtly, but undeniably louder. The walls of the cabin seemed to be closing in, pressing down on me, the sounds emanating from within them like the breathing of some vast, unseen creature. Terror, raw and primal, gripped me. I was not alone. I was trapped. And whatever was in the walls, whatever was whispering in the silence, it was waiting for me. Just like the photograph had said, "We're waiting for you, Alex." The whispers grew louder, closer, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that part 3 would be about discovering exactly who or what was waiting, and why. The whispers intensified, no longer just at the edge of hearing, but a distinct, sibilant murmur that seemed to vibrate through the very air in the cabin. The scratching grew louder too, becoming more frantic, more insistent, like something trapped and desperate to get out, or to get in. I backed away from the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs, the cryptic note clutched tightly in my hand. Was always watching, not alone them inside. The words swam in my vision, blurring with my rising panic. Them. Who were them? And inside what? The walls. The cabin itself, or something else. My gaze darted around the room, searching for an explanation, for a way out, for anything that made sense in this rapidly unraveling reality. The furniture, draped in dust sheets, looked like shrouded figures, silently observing. The fireplace, cold and dark, seemed to emanate a palpable chill. Even the photograph of Grandma Eleanor on the mantelpiece, once a source of faint comfort, now felt like a mocking reminder of a past that was no longer safe, no longer real. The scratching sound shifted, moving from the wall to the floorboards beneath my feet. It was closer now, more distinct, a dry, scraping sound that made my teeth clench. And the whispers, they were coalescing, forming into something almost recognizable, almost words. I took another step back, my heel hitting something solid. The table. I hadn't noticed it before, in my frantic search for a key, but now, in the dim, unnatural twilight filtering through the windows, I saw it. Beneath the rough-hewn wooden table, almost hidden in the shadows, was a trapdoor, set flush with the wooden floorboards, almost invisible unless you were looking directly at it. A small brass ring served as a handle, tarnished and green with age. I hadn't seen it before, hadn't even considered the possibility of a basement or cellar. But now, it was there, suddenly. Undeniably present, like it had been waiting for me to find it all along. Could this be it? Could this be the inside the note was referring to? Was this where they were? Or was this an escape? A way out of this increasingly terrifying cabin? Hesitantly, I reached down towards the brass ring, my fingers trembling. The scratching beneath the floorboards intensified. Directly beneath the trapdoor now, as if whatever was down there sensed my discovery. The whispers grew louder too, swirling around me, almost forming into coherent phrases, but still just out of reach of understanding. Taking a deep breath, I grasped the cold brass ring and pulled. The trapdoor resisted at first, stuck fast with years of disuse. But with a sharp tug, it gave way with a loud crack of protesting wood, swinging upwards and outwards, revealing a dark, gaping hole in the floor. A rush of cold, damp air poured out of the opening, carrying with it a smell far more potent than the faint mustiness of the cabin. This was a heavy, earthy smell like damp soil and decaying leaves, mixed with that same acrid sweetness, now overpowering, nauseatingly strong. The smell of burnt sugar and rot, amplified and concentrated, emanating from the darkness below. I peered into the opening, my eyes struggling to adjust to the absolute blackness that swallowed the light. It was impossible to see anything, just an impenetrable void, a gaping maw in the floorboards. The scratching was louder now, coming from directly below, and the whispers, they were clearer now, almost forming words, almost calling my name. Alex. The whisper was faint, sibilant, but undeniably there, my name, whispered from the darkness below. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped me. This was it. This was the source of the dread, the source of the messages, the source of whatever was waiting for me in Cavern, the trapdoor, the darkness below. Inside. But what was down there, A basement, a cellar. And what was making those sounds? What was whispering my name? Logic screamed at me to slam the trapdoor shut, to barricade myself in the cabin, to find another way out, any way out, and run. Run as fast and as far as I could from Oak Haven and never look back. But another, darker impulse, a morbid curiosity, a terrifying fascination, held me rooted to the spot. I had to know. I had to see what was down there. I had come this far, drawn by an unseen force, and now, at the precipice of the unknown, I couldn't turn back. Against every instinct for self-preservation, against the rising tide of terror that threatened to drown me, I lowered myself to the edge of the trapdoor opening. I could feel the cold, damp air rising from below, chilling my skin, raising goosebumps on my arms. The scratching intensified, a frantic, eager sound, and the whispers, they were clearer now, almost understandable, like a language just beyond the reach of my comprehension. Taking another shaky breath, I swung my legs over the edge and lowered myself into the darkness. My feet scrabbled for purchase, finding a narrow wooden ladder, steep and rickety, leading down into the black void. The air grew colder, damper, the smell of decay even stronger as I descended. The scratching and whispering followed me down, echoing in the confined space, surrounding me, enveloping me. The darkness was absolute, impenetrable, pressing in on me from all sides. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Slowly, cautiously, I descended the ladder, each rung groaning under my weight, threatening to give way. The sounds from below grew louder, closer, and the whispers, they were almost words now, almost sentences. "Welcome, Alexa." The whisper was clearer now, a sibilant, breathy voice, just barely audible in the darkness. "We've been waiting." My heart leaped into my throat. They knew my name. Whatever was down here, they knew who I was. They were expecting me. They had been waiting. The ladder ended abruptly, my feet landing on a cold, earthen floor. I was in a basement, or a root cellar, or something similar. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, and the cold was bone-chilling, seeping into me, stealing my breath. I stood for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the absolute darkness, though I knew it was futile. There was no light down here, no hint of illumination, just an oppressive, suffocating blackness. The scratching and whispering were all around me now, echoing in the darkness, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello." My voice was a hoarse croak in the silence, swallowed by the darkness. "Is anyone there?" Silence. For a moment, only the sound of my own ragged breathing filled the void. Then, the scratching resumed, louder now, closer, and the whispers, they returned, stronger, clearer, no longer just whispers, but voices. Multiple voices, murmurant, overlapping, speaking in unison, yet somehow distinct. "Welcome, Alex." The voices echoed in the darkness, surrounding me, caressing me with their cold, breathy sound. "We're so glad you're here. We have so much to show you. Grandmother sent you. She wants you to join yous. It's been too long." "We've been waiting." The voices swirled around me, a chorus of sibilant murmurs, each phrase a chilling piece of a terrifying puzzle. "Grandmother sent them. It's been too long. Waiting. What did it all mean?" And then, slowly, gradually, as my eyes strained against the darkness, as my senses sharpened in the oppressive void, I began to see. Not with my eyes, not exactly, but with some other sense, some primal awareness that bypassed sight, that perceived the darkness itself. Shapes began to emerge from the blackness, indistinct at first, vague outlines in the void. Then they sharpened, solidified, taking form. Figures, standing in the darkness, surrounding me, their shapes coalescing from the shadows. Tall, gaunt figures, impossibly thin, their limbs elongate and distorted like stretched shadows. Their heads were small, almost vestigial, perched atop long, slender necks. And their eyes, even in the darkness, I could see their eyes. Glimmering points of light, burning with a cold, malevolent intensity, reflecting something inhuman. They were there. Them. Waiting for me in the darkness. And as I stared at those shadowy figures, as their cold, burning eyes fixed on me, I understood, with a chilling certainty, what they were, and what they wanted, and it was far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. Their eyes, those cold, burning eyes, they were the focal point, drawing my gaze, holding it captive. As I stared into them, the darkness around them seemed to recede, and the shapes of the figures became clearer, more defined. They were humanoid, in a twisted, grotesque way. Their skin was stretched taut over sharp bones, pale and translucent, like parchment stretched over a frame. I could almost see through them. See the faint outlines of the earthen walls behind them, as if they were woven from shadow and dust. Their mouths were thin, Lepless slits that didn't move as they spoke, their voices emanating from somewhere deeper within their forms, resonating in my skull, bypassing my ears entirely. The whispers were sentences now, coherent, chillingly welcoming. "Welcome, Alexa," the chorus of voices repeated, echoing in the confined space. "We are the keepers of Oakhaven, keepers. Keepers of what? Of this darkness, of this decay, of this suffocating silence." Grandmother knows a voice, slightly higher pitched, sibilant as the others, but with a hint of something feminine. She understood Grandma Elena, understood them. My kind, gentle grandmother who baked cookies and told bedtime stories. It was impossible. And yet the photograph on the mantelpiece, the message on the back, "We're waiting for you, Alex." It all pointed to some connection, some terrifying link between my past and this present nightmare. She invited us in, a deeper voice, resonant and chilling, like the scraping of stone on stone. Long ago to protect Oakhaven, invited them in. To protect Oakhaven? From what? And how could these things protect anything? They exuded nothing but cold and decay, a palpable aura of wrongness that seeped into my very soul. The noise, you hear it too. The feminine voice again, closer now. The shimmering eyes drawing nearer in the darkness. The city, its loud, chaotic, unclean, the noise. The static behind my eyes. The anxiety that had driven me to seek escape in the first place. They knew about that too. They knew about me. A cold dread washed over me, a sense of utter violation, as if they had been watching me, observing me, even before I came to Oakhaven. Here it is quiet, the deep voice, closer now as well, the shadowy figures surrounding me, forming a circle in the darkness, peaceful, clean, peaceful, clean. This suffocating darkness, this bone-chilling cold, this stench of decay, this was their idea of peace, of cleanliness. My mind recoiled, struggling to reconcile their words with the terrifying reality of their presence. Grandmother found peace here. The feminine voice, almost a caress now, the shimmering eyes inches from my face, their cold light burning into my soul. She joined us to become one with Oakhaven, joined them. Became one with Oakhaven. What did that even mean? My grandmother kind, gentle Grandma Eleanor joined these things. It was unthinkable. And yet the Vitesh card. Come to Oakhaven. It's been too long. It wasn't just an invitation to the cabin. It was an invitation to this. We've been waiting for you, Alex. The voices, a chorus again, swirling around me, pressing in, suffocating. It's your turn now. My turn. My turn for one of them. To become one with Oakhaven. To become like them. The horror of the realization crashed over me, a tidal wave of icy terror that threatened to shatter my sanity. Gnome. The word escaped my lips, a weak, breathy whisper, barely audible in the chorus of their voices. No, I don't want to. A silence fell, sudden and absolute, broken only by the frantic hammering of my heart. The shadowy figures froze, their shimmering eyes fixed on me, unblinking, unmoving. The whispers ceased, the chorus silenced. For a moment, there was only the oppressive darkness, the bone, chilling cold, and the weight of their unseen gaze. Then, the deep voice, resonant and chilling, spoke again, the words echoing in the darkness, laced with a new tone, something colder, harder, more final. You don't have a choice, Alex. The figures moved then, slowly, deliberately, closing the circle around me, their elongated limbs reaching out, their pale, translucent fingers stretching towards me. The scratching sound resumed, louder than ever, not just from the floorboards now, but from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere surrounding me, closing in, a cacophony of dry, scraping sound. Panic seized me, a raw, animalistic terror that stripped away all pretense of reason of control. I had to get out. I had to escape. But escape to where? The trapdoor, the cabin, the woods. Were any of them safe now? Or was Oakhaven itself a trap, a cage, designed to lure me in, to claim me, to make me one of them? I spun around, desperate to find a way out, any way out. But there was none. Only the earthen walls, the trapdoor above, and the circle of shadowy figures closing in, their cold eyes burning into me, their skeletal fingers reaching. Grandmother wants this, sir. The feminine voice, closer now, right beside my ear, a breath of icy air on my skin. She knows it's best. Best for whom? For Oakhaven, or for me, was this some twisted inheritance? Some macabre legacy passed down through my bloodline? Was this why I was drawn here? Was I always meant to end up in this darkness, surrounded by these things? The figures were upon me now, the cold fingers brushing against my skin, sending shivers of icy dread through my veins. The scratching intensified, a deafening crescendo, and the whispers they became a roar. A chorus of sibilant voices, chanting, murmuring, singing in a language I didn't understand, yet somehow felt in my bones, in my blood, in the very core of my being. Join us, Alex. The voices roared, pressing in, overwhelming me, suffocating me. Become one of use. Become one with Okavung. Become keeper. The coldness intensified, seeping into me, numbing my senses, stealing my will. The darkness pressed in, swallowing me whole, erasing the world, erasing myself. The voices became everything, the only reality, the only truth. And in the heart of that darkness, in the core of that cold, something within me shifted. Something yielded. Something broke. The fear didn't vanish, not entirely, but it changed. It became something else, something colder, something accepting. The panic subsided, replaced by a strange, unsettling calm. The resistance faded, replaced by a sense of inevitability. Yes, the word escaped my lips, not a whisper this time, but a clear, distinct voice resonating in the darkness, echoing the voices of the keepers. Wes, I will join you. The shadowy figures stilled, their cold eyes softening, dimming slightly, the burning intensity replaced by something softer, almost welcoming. The scratching subsided, fading into a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat in the earth. The chorus of voices softened too, becoming a gentle murmur, a sibilant lullaby. Welcome, Alex. The voices whispered, no longer a roar, but a soft, soothing sound. Welcome home. The coldness enveloped me completely now, no longer chilling, but comforting. The darkness surrounded me, no longer oppressive, but embracing. The smell of decay no longer nauseating, but familiar, almost sweet. I was no longer Alex Turner, the frayed, exhausted escapee from the city. That Alex was gone, faded, erased, replaced by something else. Something new. Something more. I was Alex, keeper of Okavum, one with them, one with the darkness, the cold, the silence, the decay, one with Okavum itself. And in that moment, in that darkness, surrounded by the keepers, I found peace. A cold, silent, eternal peace. The noise was gone. The anxiety was gone. Only the stillness remained. Only the darkness. Only Okavum. And it was good. The postcard, the invitation. It all made sense now. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't foolishness. It was destiny. I was always meant to come here. I was always meant to join them. I was always meant to become a keeper of Okavum. And now I was home. Forever. In the darkness. With them. Waiting for the next invitation. Waiting for the next to join us. Waiting in the silence of Okavum. The scratching begins again, a soft, rhythmic sound, coming from within the walls, within the floorboards, within the earth itself. The whispers return, gentle, welcoming, eternal. Okavum is waiting, and so are we. Welcome home.